The cream-colored envelope sat on the kitchen counter like a small bomb waiting to detonate. I stared at it while washing the breakfast dishes, my hands submerged in soapy water that had long gone cold. The elegant script on the front read, "Mr. and Mrs. Richard Thornwood, cordially invited to the annual Thornwood and Associates Gala. My husband Richard's law firm, the company where he was a senior partner. The place I'd heard about for 7 years but had never been allowed to see. Absolutely not." Richard's voice cut through my thoughts before I'd even asked the question. He stood in the doorway of our pristine kitchen, adjusting his tie with the precision of a man who controlled every detail of his life, including me. "I haven't said anything yet," I replied softly, keeping my eyes on the dishes. "You don't need to, Eleanor. I can see you staring at that invitation like it's a golden ticket." He walked toward me, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor. "The answer is no, just like it's been no for the past 6 years. 6 galas, 6 years of being left behind while Richard networked, impressed clients, and climbed the ladder of success. 6 years of being told I wasn't polished enough, sophisticated enough, impressive enough to stand beside him in public. Richard, I'm your wife. Don't you think it's strange that no one at your firm has ever met me?" He laughed, that sharp, dismissive sound that made my stomach clench. "Strange? What's strange is that you think you belong in that world." He grabbed his briefcase from the counter. "These people are accomplished, Eleanor. They're attorneys, judges, business owners. They speak multiple languages. They've traveled the world. They have graduate degrees and stock portfolios and actual careers. And what do you have?" The unspoken words hung in the air between us. "I have a degree," I said quietly. "A degree in literature," he scoffed, "from a state school, that you've done absolutely nothing with." He stepped closer, his cologne suffocating. "Do you know what they'd think if I showed up with you? My colleagues would wonder why a senior partner is married to a woman who spends her days reading books and wiping counters." Each word was a carefully placed knife, slicing away at whatever remained of my self-worth. "You'd embarrass me, Eleanor. You'd stand there in whatever discount dress you managed to find, making small talk about novels, while everyone else discusses cases and mergers and actual important things." His eyes were cold. "I've worked too hard to build my reputation to have you drag it down." I turned back to the dishes, blinking away tears. "It's for the best," Richard continued, his voice softening into that patronizing tone. "You wouldn't enjoy it anyway. You'd be bored. Trust me, I'm protecting you from an uncomfortable evening." Protecting me. That's what he always called it. "I understand," I said, because that's what he wanted to hear. "Good." He kissed the top of my head, a seal of ownership. "I'll be home late tonight. Don't wait up." The door closed behind him. Only then did I allow myself to cry, my tears mixing with the cold, soapy water. But as I stood there, something shifted inside me. Something that had been sleeping for 7 years began to wake up. I dried my hands and picked up the invitation. The gala was in 3 weeks. What Richard didn't know, what he'd never bothered to ask about, was that I hadn't spent the last 7 years just reading. Books and wiping counters. I'd been building something, carefully, quietly, patiently, and the time was coming to reveal it. I stood in my walk-in closet the next morning, staring at the rows of clothes Richard had approved over the years. Beige, grey, navy. Nothing too bright. Nothing that might make me stand out. My laptop sat on the small desk in the corner. My private space that Richard never entered because women's clothes bored him. I opened it, entering a password he didn't know existed. The screen came to life, showing multiple windows I'd carefully hidden, email accounts Richard had never seen, financial statements for accounts in my name only, business correspondence that would have shocked him, and at the center of it all, Meridian Literary Agency, my agency, the one I'd built from nothing over the past 6 years. It had started innocently. A college friend, Jessica, had written a novel and asked me to read it. I'd given her detailed feedback, helped her restructure the plot. When she'd secured a publishing deal, she'd credited me as her editor. Her publisher reached out asking if I'd be interested in editing other manuscripts. I'd said yes. What began as freelance editing evolved into something bigger. Authors started asking me to represent them. I learned contracts, negotiations, subsidiary rights. I worked during the hours Richard was at the office, conducting video meetings, building relationships with publishers across the country. Meridian Literary Agency now represented 43 authors. 12 were New York Times bestsellers. Last year alone, we'd negotiated over $15 million in book deals, and Richard had no idea. I'd kept it secret because I knew he'd make me stop. Then, as the agency grew, I realized this secret gave me something he couldn't control, a piece of myself he hadn't managed to diminish. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Huge news. Penguin wants to preempt the Collins trilogy. They're offering $2.5 million. Need your approval. My fingers trembled as I typed approve. That's incredible. Another text. This one from my assistant Marissa. Reminder. Forbes interview scheduled for Thursday. They want to feature you in their Women in Business series. Still okay with using your photo? I hesitated. The Forbes interview would mean coming out of the shadows. Richard would see it. His colleagues would see it. Everyone would know. Confirm, I typed. Let's move forward. As I hit send, my heart raced. The decision felt irreversible. I opened my private email, hundreds of messages, authors thanking me for changing their lives, publishers praising my business acumen, industry colleagues inviting me to conferences. In this inbox, I was Eleanor Hartley, literary agent, advocate for authors, respected businesswoman. In Richard's house, I was Eleanor Thornwood, disappointing wife, intellectual lightweight, woman who didn't deserve a seat at the table. The disconnect had become unbearable. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back was 34 years old, but looked both younger and older. Younger because Richard, like me, fresh-faced. Older because stress had left lines around my eyes that had nothing to do with laughter. My hair was long, Richard's preference always tied back. My clothes were shapeless. My posture was diminished, shoulders curved inward, as if trying to take up less space. This wasn't me. This was a costume I'd been wearing so long I'd almost forgotten there was anything underneath. The gala was in 3 weeks. I pulled out my phone and made a call to a number I'd been saving. Anastasia's Boutique. This is Celeste speaking. Hi, Celeste. This is Eleanor Hartley. I need a dress for a very important evening, something that makes a statement, something unforgettable. Of course, Ms. Hartley, when can you come in? This afternoon, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in years. I'll be there at 2. As I ended the call, I caught my reflection again. This time I stood up straighter, let my shoulders fall back, lifted my chin. There she was, the woman I used to be. The woman I'd been building in secret, Eleanor Hartley, about to step into the light. Anastasia's Boutique sat on a tree-lined street in the Arts District, miles from the suburban shopping centres where Richard expected me to buy clothes. The window displays featured gowns that looked like wearable art, flowing fabrics, bold colours, intricate details that caught the light. A bell chimed as I pushed open the door. The interior smelled of jasmine and possibility. Eleanor Hartley, a woman in her 50s, approached, silver hair styled in an elegant bob. She wore a perfectly tailored burgundy suit. I'm Celeste. Wonderful to finally meet you in person. In person? She smiled knowingly. I follow the publishing industry closely. I've been reading about Meridian's success for years. When you called this morning, I put 2 and 2 together. Her eyes held no judgment, only warmth. I noticed you used your professional name, not the one on your credit card billing address. My cheeks flushed. It's complicated. The best transformations usually are. She gestured toward the back. Come, let's talk about what you need. The private consultation room had floor-to-ceiling mirrors, velvet seating and lighting that made everyone look radiant. Celeste poured us both champagne. Tell me about this very important evening. I took a sip. When was the last time I'd had champagne? Richard preferred whiskey and said sparkling wine was what sorority girls drink. My husband's law firm is having their annual gala. He's a senior partner at Thornwood and Associates. Thornwood, Celeste repeated, her expression shifting slightly. Very prestigious, very old money. She paused. And your husband doesn't know about Meridian? No. He thinks I spend my days reading and cleaning. And he's forbidden you from attending this gala? Nodded. Celeste set down her champagne glass and leaned forward. Eleanor, I'm going to ask you something very direct. Are you looking for a dress to please your husband and fit into his world? Or are you looking for a dress to announce who you really are? The question hung in the air. In the mirrors surrounding us, I saw infinite reflections of myself, all waiting for my answer. I'm done trying to fit into his world, I said finally. I want everyone in that room to see me, the real me. Celeste's smile was fierce. Then let's make you impossible to ignore. Over the next 3 hours, Celeste brought in gowns that demanded attention. Midnight blue with intricate beading, silk with hand-embroidered details. But it was the third dress that made my breath catch. Deep emerald green, the color of forests and secrets. The fabric shimmered when it moved, catching the light like water. The neckline was elegant but confident, the waist perfectly structured, the skirt flowing in a way that suggested both strength and grace. It was everything Richard had convinced me I wasn't. Try it, Celeste urged. In the dressing room, I slipped out of my beige cardigan and shapeless pants. For a moment, I stood in plain underwear, the kind Richard bought for me in bulk, and felt the weight of 7 years of diminishment. Then I stepped into the dress. Open your eyes, Eleanor. I did. The woman in the mirror was a stranger, not because she looked different, though the dress transformed her, but because she looked present, visible, real. The emerald green made my eyes brighter, my skin luminous. The cut emphasized a figure I'd forgotten I had. My posture automatically straightened. I looked powerful. That's the one, Celeste said softly. That's who you really are. Tears pricked my eyes. I'd forgotten. We often do when someone spends years convincing us we're less than we are. Celeste's reflection met mine. But the truth doesn't disappear just because someone refuses to see it. You've been extraordinary all along, Eleanor. This dress just makes it harder for others to look away. We selected shoes, elegant heels that added 3 inches, jewelry, subtle but expensive, pieces that whispered wealth rather than shouted it. She recommended a hairstylist, a makeup artist. As we finalized details, Celeste asked, "Does your husband know you're coming to the gala?" "Not yet. And when he sees you?" I thought about Richard's face, his shock, his inevitable anger. "Let him see," I said. "Let everyone see." Celeste packaged the dress in a garment bag, discreetly charged to my private account. As I prepared to leave, she touched my arm. "Eleanor, the dress doesn't make the transformation. It just reveals what was always there." Her eyes were serious. "Whatever happens at that gala, remember, you're not becoming someone new. You're finally being yourself." I drove home with the garment bag hidden in my trunk, my heart pounding with terror and exhilaration. The woman leaving was ready for war. The Forbes interview took place in a sleek downtown office with panoramic city views. The journalist, Amanda Chen, was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for asking the questions others avoided. "Eleanor Hartley," she began, studying me across the polished table. "You've built one of the most successful literary agencies in the country, yet you've maintained an almost mysterious public profile. Why the secrecy?" I'd prepared for this question. I wanted the focus to be on my authors and their work, not on me. "Admirable," Amanda said, "but that's changing now. You're doing this interview, agreeing to be photographed." "What changed?" The photographer adjusted his lighting in the corner. "In a few weeks, my face would be in Forbes magazine, on their website, shared across social media. There would be no more hiding." I realized that by staying invisible, I was sending the wrong message, I said carefully. There are women building businesses, creating success, and they're doing it quietly because they've been taught that's what they should do. Be excellent, but don't make noise. Achieve, but don't celebrate. Succeed, but don't let it threaten anyone. Amanda leaned forward. "And you're done with that?" "I'm done with that." The interview continued for another hour. We discussed Meridian's growth, my approach to author representation, deals I'd negotiated, industry relationships I'd built. "One last question," she said. "You work from home. Are you married? Do you have family support for this demanding career?" My throat tightened. The truth was too messy. "Yes, I'm married. No, my husband doesn't know I have a career. He thinks I'm a housewife who reads too much. I prefer to keep my personal life private," I said diplomatically. Amanda nodded, but her expression suggested she'd heard what I wasn't saying. The photo shoot that followed was surreal. The photographer directed me into confident poses, direct gazes, expressions that conveyed authority. Everything Richard had spent 7 years teaching me to suppress. "Beautiful," the photographer called. "Now give me powerful." I thought about negotiating 7-figure deals, about authors who'd thanked me for believing in them, about building Meridian from nothing while pretending to be nothing. The camera clicked rapidly. On the drive home, I felt the weight of what I'd just done. The Forbes article would publish in 2 weeks, 1 week before Richard's gala. The timing was deliberate. When I arrived home, Richard's Mercedes was already in the driveway, unusual and potentially problematic. He was in the kitchen, looking through mail. "Where were you?" My heart spiked. "Running errands. Why?" "I tried calling. You didn't answer." My phone was in my purse. I didn't hear it. He held up a credit card statement. "This came today." He opened it, scanning charges. Nothing unusual. Target, grocery store, gas. All appropriate. The inspection of my purchases. What I didn't know was that I had 3 other credit cards he'd never seen. "I'm careful with money," I said. "I know. That's one thing I can count on. You're not frivolous like other wives." He smiled, meaning it as a compliment. "Henderson's wife spent $8,000 on a handbag. Can you imagine?" I thought about the dress in my closet, the shoes, the jewelry. "That does seem excessive," I agreed. 2 weeks until the Forbes article. 3 weeks until the gala. The countdown had begun. The Forbes article published on a Wednesday morning. My phone, the private one, exploded with notifications before dawn. Congratulations from authors, interview requests from podcasts, invitations to conferences. The publishing industry was taking notice. I lay in bed next to Richard, who was still sleeping, and scrolled through the article. The headline read, "The literary agent who built a multi-million-dollar agency in secret." My photograph looked back at me, confident, professional, powerful. The article detailed Meridian's success, my negotiation tactics, quotes from grateful authors, but it was the final paragraph that made my breath catch. Hartley's story raises questions about visibility and success for women in business. When asked why she's choosing to step into the public eye now, she said simply, "I'm done apologizing for my success." It's a statement that will resonate with countless women who've been taught to shrink themselves to make others comfortable. Richard stirred. I quickly locked my phone and tucked it under my pillow. He left at 7:30 without ever opening Forbes or checking their website. But others at his firm would. Around noon, Richard called, unusual for a workday. "Eleanor, something strange happened. A client mentioned seeing an article about someone with your maiden name. Eleanor Hartley, some literary agent." He laughed. "Can you imagine? What are the odds?" My heart hammered. That is strange. The guy was going on about how impressive she is. "I told him you have the same maiden name, but you're just my wife, not some business mogul." Another laugh. "Though I suppose you're impressive in your own way." The patronizing tone made my stomach turn. At 3:30, Richard's assistant Margaret called the house line. "Mrs. Thornwood, I apologize for disturbing you. A reporter from the Business Journal called asking for comment on his wife's literary agency. They want to do a follow-up about how he supported your entrepreneurial success." She paused. "I wasn't sure how to respond. I didn't know you had a business." My mouth went dry. "It's complicated, Margaret. Should I tell them no comment?" "Yes, please. And Margaret, don't mention this call to Richard just yet." But we both knew it was too late. Richard came home at 6:30, earlier than usual. He walked in slowly, his phone in one hand. His face was unreadable. Eleanor. That one word contained 7 years of our marriage. "Would you like to explain?" he said, voice eerily calm. "Why 3 of my colleagues sent me a Forbes article today featuring my wife's face and a business I knew nothing about." I set down the knife I'd been using. "I was going to tell you." "When?" The calm was cracking. "When were you planning to tell me you've been running a multi-million-dollar company from our house? That you've been lying to me for years?" "I never lied. You never asked. You assumed." "I assumed my wife was actually my wife, not some secret businesswoman playing house." He threw his phone on the counter. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Everyone at the firm now knows I had no idea what my own wife was doing. Or maybe they think I'm accomplished," I said quietly. He laughed, sharp, bitter. "Accomplished? You've made me look like a fool." He stopped, realization crossing his face. "The gala. This is about the gala, isn't it?" "No," I said. "This is about proving I deserve to exist as more than your accessory." His hand slammed on the counter. "You ungrateful. Do you know what I've given you? This house, this lifestyle, the privilege of not having to work? I'm not trying to humiliate you, Richard. I'm trying to be myself." "Yourself?" His voice dripped with contempt. "You're my wife. That's who you are. This fantasy about being some powerful agent is embarrassing." "I'm not shutting it down," I said. "Yes, you are. Tomorrow you're releasing a statement saying you're stepping back to focus on your marriage." "No." The word hung between us like a grenade. "What did you say?" "I said no. Meridian is mine. I'm not giving it up." His face transformed. "You don't have a choice." "Actually," I said, finding strength I didn't know I possessed, "I do have a choice, and I'm choosing myself. If you don't shut this down, I will make your life hell." "You already have," I interrupted, "for 7 years. You've controlled what I wear, who I talk to, how I spend my time. You've convinced me I'm not smart enough, accomplished enough, interesting enough. You've diminished me until I almost disappeared." "I made you better. You made me smaller," the words burst out. "You took a woman who graduated with honors and convinced her she was nothing. But I'm not nothing, Richard. I never was." We stood on opposite sides of the kitchen island, 7 years crumbling between us. "The gala is in 10 days, I continued. "I'm going, not as your permission-seeking wife, but as Eleanor Hartley, successful literary agent." "Like hell you are." His voice was dangerous. "You show up at that gala and I will destroy you. I will tell everyone you're mentally unstable, acting erratically. Who do you think they'll believe?" "Do what you need to do," I said, steadiness surprising me. "But I'm done being invisible." Richard stared at me like he'd never seen me before. "You're making a huge mistake," he said finally. "But fine, go to the gala. Embarrass yourself. Just know that when it's over, you'll have nothing." He grabbed his briefcase. "I'm staying at the club tonight, maybe for several nights." The door slammed. I stood alone in our designer kitchen and felt something unexpected. Relief. For the first time in 7 years, I could breathe. The house felt different with Richard gone, lighter. I walked through rooms I'd lived in for 7 years and saw them with new eyes, beautiful, expensive, and completely soulless. My phone buzzed. Jessica calling. "I saw Richard leaving," she said. "Mrs. Chen across. The street called me. She was worried. I'd forgotten Jessica still lived close enough to check on me. We'd remained friends throughout my marriage, though Richard had limited our contact, saying she was a bad influence. "He knows about Meridian," I said, "and he's not happy. Come stay with me. Leave that house." The offer was tempting, but leaving felt like retreat. "I'm staying," I said. "I'm not running anymore." We talked for another hour. Jessica filled me in on the literary world's reaction, overwhelmingly positive, with publishers reaching out about partnerships. My phone rang again. Unknown number. "Eleanor, this is Margaret, Mr. Thornwood's assistant." "Margaret, hi. Is everything okay?" "I'm calling from my personal phone." She sounded nervous. I wanted you to know something. After the Forbes article, I did research on Meridian. What you've accomplished is extraordinary. The way he's reacted, the things he's said at the office. She took a breath. It's not right. My eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Margaret. There's something else. Mr. Thornwood held a meeting with senior partners. I wasn't supposed to hear, but the walls are thin. They discussed strategies for managing the situation. Talk about your mental health, whether you've been stable, painting the agency as some manic episode. The threat Richard had made. He was implementing it. They're planning doctors' statements, testimonials about your absence from events, evidence of erratic behavior. Margaret's voice was urgent. But one partner, Mr. Davidson, the founding partner, shut it down. He said attacking a successful businesswoman's mental health because her husband is embarrassed is misogynistic nonsense that gets law firms sued. He told Mr. Thornwood to grow up and accept that his wife is impressive. I smiled despite everything. Really? Really? Mr. Davidson said if Mr. Thornwood pursues that strategy, he'll resign and take his clients. Not everyone thinks like your husband, Eleanor. After the call, I sat with this information. Richard's plan had been blocked, but he wouldn't give up, unless I controlled the narrative first. I opened my laptop and started writing. Not a press release, something more personal. A letter to women who'd been made to feel small. I wrote about starting Meridian in secret, about the fear of discovery, about building a business while pretending to be nothing, about realizing that hiding my success was complicity in my own. Erasure. I wrote about the Forbes article and what it meant to step into visibility, about choosing to attend the gala not to prove anything to Richard, but to stop betraying myself. When I finished, it was 3 a.m. The essay was raw, honest, vulnerable. It would make Richard furious. It would expose our marriage. I posted it on Medium, shared it to LinkedIn, sent it to Amanda Chen at Forbes. She responded within an hour. This is powerful. Can we run it tomorrow? Yes, I typed back. By morning, everyone would know. There would be no going back. I should have felt terrified. Instead, I felt free. The day of the gala arrived with unexpected sunshine. My essay had published at dawn and had been shared thousands of times by 8 a.m. The literary community responded first. Authors, agents, publishers sent messages of support. Many shared their own stories of having to hide ambitions, downplay success, make themselves smaller. Then came the legal community's reaction. Some of Richard's colleagues sent private support. Others circled wagons. My phone rang at 10:30. Mrs. Thornwood, this is James Davidson. I'm a founding partner at your husband's firm. I recognized the name, the one who'd shut down Richard's plan. Mr. Davidson, thank you for calling. I read your essay this morning. Powerful piece, troubling in what it reveals about my firm's culture. He paused. I want to apologize. Your husband has attended firm events for 7 years without his wife, and none of us questioned it. We should have. You couldn't have known. We should have asked. That's the point. His voice was firm but kind. I'm calling because I wanted you to know you're welcome at tonight's gala. More than welcome. We'd be honored to have you, regardless of what your husband says. Richard doesn't have authority to ban you from a firm event. As a founding partner, I'm making it explicit. Eleanor Hartley is invited. If Richard has a problem, he can take it up with me. After the call, I sat in my car at the salon parking lot. The transformation I'd planned for weeks was about to begin. Jessica texted, I'm here. At the salon, Moral Support Brigade has arrived. I walked inside to find not just Jessica, but 4 other women from the publishing world. They'd driven hours to be here. We're your entourage, Jessica announced. The salon staff treated it like a celebration. My hairstylist, Marcus, had read my essay that morning and declared himself personally invested in this glow-up. We're going for sophisticated power, he said. You've been hiding under schoolgirl ponytails for too long. Over 3 hours I was transformed, haircut and styled in loose waves, makeup that enhanced rather than masked. When Marcus spun me around to face the mirror, I gasped. The woman looking back was stunning, not because of hair or makeup, but because she looked confident, powerful, unafraid. "There she is," Jessica whispered. "The Eleanor I met in college." We returned to my house. My friends helped me into the emerald dress, adjusted the fabric until it was perfect. I stood in front of the mirror, surrounded by women who believed in me. "You're going to walk into that ballroom," Jessica said, "and everyone is going to realize exactly what they've been missing." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Charlotte Henderson, wife of one of Richard's partners. I read your essay. I'm attending the gala tonight specifically to meet you. You're my hero." More texts followed. Women I'd never met, wives of Richard's colleagues, female attorneys, all reaching out. I wasn't walking into that ballroom alone. At 6:30, I stood alone in my closet, fully transformed, ready to leave. I took one last look in the mirror. The emerald dress shimmered. My hair fell in perfect waves. But more than that, my eyes held determination. I grabbed my clutch and headed for the door. The venue was 40 minutes away. I'd arrive around 7:30 when the ballroom would be full. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Mrs. Chen watering her garden. She looked up, saw me, and gave me an enthusiastic thumbs up. I smiled back and drove toward the rest of my life. The Grandview Hotel ballroom was legendary. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown, where the city's elite held their most important events. Tonight, it would be where Eleanor Thornwood ceased to exist and Eleanor Hartley emerged fully. I pulled up to the valet at 7:35. The young man who opened my door did a double-take. "Good evening, ma'am. Enjoy your evening." Through the glass doors, I could see the ballroom filled with guests, tuxedos, designer gowns, champagne, a string quartet. My phone buzzed. "Jessica, I'm inside near the West Bar. I can see the entrance. You've got this." I took a breath, adjusted my dress, and walked through the doors. The entrance required descending a short staircase, dramatic, theatrical, designed to announce arrivals. As I reached the top, I paused. It took 3 seconds for someone to notice me, 5 seconds for conversations to start pausing, 10 seconds for the room to begin turning. I descended slowly, each step deliberate. The emerald dress caught the light from chandeliers, shimmering with each movement. My heels clicked against marble. My head was high, shoulders back. And then I saw him. Richard stood near the center, surrounded by colleagues, mid-conversation, laughing, holding whiskey, completely at ease, until he saw me. His face went through several emotions: confusion, recognition, shock, fury. His hand tightened on his glass so hard I thought it might shatter. Our eyes met across the ballroom. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of control, all crystallized in that single moment. I didn't look away, didn't apologize, didn't shrink. I smiled. The ballroom had gone noticeably quieter, people staring, whispering. "Eleanor?" I turned to find a distinguished man in his 60s approaching. Kind eyes, air of authority. "James Davidson," he introduced himself. "We spoke this morning. I'm so glad you came." "Mr. Davidson, thank you for the invitation. Please, James, may I introduce you to some people? Several folks have been dying to meet the brilliant mind behind Meridian." As James led me into the crowd, the room's energy shifted. The initial shock transformed into curiosity. Women approached, introducing themselves. "Your essay this morning," one woman said, tears in her eyes. "It spoke to something I've been feeling for 20 years. A senior attorney shook my hand firmly. "Eleanor Hartley, I've been following Meridian's success. Your negotiation on the Chen trilogy was masterful." Jessica appeared, champagne in hand. "You look incredible, and everyone's talking about you." "Good things," she assured me. "Mostly, although Richard looks like he's going to have an aneurysm." Over the next hour, I circulated. I talked to attorneys about books, advised a partner's wife about her manuscript, discussed negotiations with a corporate lawyer who was an aspiring author. I was charming, knowledgeable, confident, everything Richard had convinced me I couldn't be. And I was good at it. I belonged in this room. Around 9, I found myself near the windows. Margaret approached with her husband, who hugged me like an old friend. "Thank you," Margaret said quietly, "for everything." Before I could respond, I felt a presence. Richard, his face a carefully controlled mask of civility. "Eleanor, might I have a word?" "Of course." We stepped onto the terrace, away from the crowd. Through the windows, guests watched us. Richard waited until we were alone, then turned with barely controlled fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Attending my husband's company gala," I said calmly, "as you've forbidden me from doing for 7 years. You look ridiculous. This dress, this hair, this desperate attempt to what? To look beautiful? To be visible? You've humiliated me, Eleanor. That essay, showing up here, everyone's talking about you, about us." "Yes," I agreed. "They are. I want you to leave. Now." "No." His hand moved toward my arm, then stopped, remembering the crowd watching. "You're making a scene." "I'm having conversations, Richard, meeting people, discussing business, all the things you said I couldn't do, and I'm succeeding. This isn't success. This is you having a public breakdown while wearing an expensive costume. Really, because James Davidson invited me personally. Your colleagues are impressed. Your colleague Henderson's wife wants to send me her manuscript." I stepped closer. "I'm not embarrassing you, Richard. I'm outshining you." His face went dark. "Everyone in there thinks you're pathetic. They're being nice because they feel sorry for you. They're humoring you." "Is that what you need to believe? You think showing up in a dress changes anything? You're still the same. Insecure, dependent woman. This whole performance is pathetic." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw him clearly. The control, the cruelty, the desperate need to diminish others to feel powerful. It wasn't about me. It had never been about me. I'd spent 7 years believing his assessment, 7 years thinking I needed his approval. I was done. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly. "This is a performance, but not the way you think. For 7 years, I performed being Eleanor Thornwood, the diminished wife. Tonight I'm done performing. This is who I actually am." I turned to walk back inside. "If you go back in there," he called after me, "we're done. Our marriage is over." I paused, looked back at him, and felt nothing. No fear, no regret, no desperate need for approval. "I know," I said, and walked back into the ballroom. As I re-entered, something had shifted. The confrontation everyone had witnessed through the windows had changed the energy. Richard followed me. Inside, his composure cracking, he approached James Davidson and several senior partners near the bar. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption," Richard said, voice carrying. "My wife is going through personal issues, mental health concerns." The room went quiet. This was the strategy Margaret had warned about. "Richard," James said, his voice cold, "I'd be very careful about what you say next." But Richard was past caring. "Everyone deserves to know the truth. Eleanor has been behaving erratically. This agency she claims to run, the agency that generated $15 million in deals last year?" I interrupted, my voice clear and calm. Richard turned to me. "You've been lying about that. Exaggerating?" "Actually," a voice called out, "I can verify those numbers." A woman in her 50s stepped forward, elegant, confident. "I'm Catherine Chen, editorial director at Penguin Random House. Eleanor represented the author for our biggest acquisition last year, a $2.5 million deal. I've worked with her for 4 years, and she's one of the most brilliant agents in the industry." "And I'm David Morrison from Simon & Schuster," another voice added. "Eleanor negotiated our 7-figure deal for the Mitchell memoir. She's exceptional." More voices joined. Publishers, editors, authors, each confirming Meridian's success, my professional reputation. Richard's face went from red to white. The story he'd been trying to sell was crumbling. "So let me understand, James," Davidson said, voice sharp. "Your wife built a highly successful business, earned respect from major publishers, and your response was to hide her existence and question her sanity. That's not... You don't understand. I understand perfectly. James set down his drink. I understand that for 7 years you've kept your accomplished wife away from firm events because you were intimidated. I understand that when her achievements became public, your first instinct was to discredit her. The ballroom was silent, every guest watching. Richard looked around desperately. She deliberately deceived me because she knew you'd try to stop her? I said quietly. You're right, because every time I expressed interest in anything beyond being your wife, you shut it down. That's not true. It's completely true. Charlotte Henderson stepped forward. Richard, I've heard you talk about your wife for years. You've called her simple, uncomplicated, said she wasn't comfortable with intellectual conversation. Other voices chimed in, partners' wives sharing similar observations, female attorneys recounting dismissive comments Richard had made about women's careers. The pattern was undeniable. This is ridiculous, Richard said, voice rising. You're all turning against me because of one essay, one dramatic entrance. We're turning against you because we finally see the truth, James said. And frankly, it reflects poorly on all of us that we didn't see it sooner. He turned to me. Eleanor, on behalf of Thornwood and Associates, I apologize. We should have asked. We should have made space for you. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you. Richard looked around the ballroom, finally realizing how completely the narrative had turned. 7 years of control had collapsed in a single evening. Fine, he said, voice bitter. Celebrate Eleanor the secret agent, but don't pretend this isn't all a performance. Just what, Richard? I asked. Just your wife? Just a woman? He looked at me with something approaching desperation. Eleanor, please, can we talk privately? No. I'm done talking to you. I'm done explaining myself. I'm done seeking your approval. You can't just... We're married. You can't end 7 years because of one argument. This isn't one argument, Richard. This is 7 years of systematic emotional abuse. This is you convincing me I was nothing so you could feel like everything. I looked around the ballroom, at the faces watching, the witnesses. I built Meridian in secret because you didn't leave me any other option. I hid my success because you made it clear my accomplishments threatened you. I stayed silent because I was afraid. My voice grew stronger, but I'm not afraid anymore, because the truth is out and everyone can see it. You didn't make me better, Richard. You made me invisible, and I'm done being invisible. The room erupted in applause. Genuine, supportive, empowering applause. Women and many men standing in solidarity. Richard looked around at the clapping crowd, his face a mixture of shock and fury. Without another word, he turned and walked out. I never saw him again. Epilogue. 6 months later, I stood in my new office, a bright space in the arts district with floor-to-ceiling windows and shelves lined with books. Meridian Literary Agency's new headquarters, complete with 3 new agents and an assistant who managed the flood of submissions. The Forbes follow-up article sat on my desk. The headline read, Eleanor Hartley, 6 months later, how stepping into the light changed everything. My divorce from Richard had been finalized last month. He'd wanted it done quickly and quietly. I kept Meridian, my accounts, my independence. He kept the house and his damaged reputation, but Meridian had exploded after the gala. The publicity brought hundreds of new submissions. Publishers wanted to work with the agency that represented the woman who built an empire in secret. I'd bought a small house near the arts district, nothing like Richard's showplace, but entirely mine, decorated with books and art and colors that made me happy. A garden, a cat named Austin. I reconnected with family, rebuilt friendships, surrounded myself with people who celebrated rather than diminished me. The literary community embraced me. I spoke at conferences about building businesses, about finding your voice, about refusing to stay small. My phone buzzed. Jessica calling. Ready for tonight? She asked. Tonight was another gala, this time an industry awards ceremony where I was receiving recognition for Meridian's success. Ready, I said, looking at the emerald dress hanging on my office door. The same one from that transformative night. Good, Because you're giving the keynote speech, remember? I've been asked to speak about my journey, about building a business in secret, about the moment I chose myself. As I prepared my notes, I thought about what I wanted to say, about the woman I'd been that day. Richard forbade me from the gala, about the dress, the heels, the decision to stop being invisible. But mostly I thought about the moment I chose myself, because that's what it came down to. Not revenge, not proving Richard wrong, not making a dramatic statement, just choosing to be myself fully and completely, regardless of who that threatened. I typed the closing words of my speech. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you've been made to feel small, if you've hidden your light, if you've apologized for your success, I want you to know something. You are enough exactly as you are. Your ambitions are not threatening. Your success is not selfish. Your voice is not too loud, and you deserve to take up space. So take it. Deliberately, unapologetically, courageously. The world is waiting to see who you really are. Stop hiding. Start shining. And never ever apologize for being extraordinary. As I finished writing, sunlight streamed through my office. Windows, illuminating the books, the success, the life I'd built by finally choosing myself. I was done being invisible, and I'd never been more visible, more powerful, more myself than I was right now. The end. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about your own journey from invisible to visible. And remember, your story matters. Your voice matters. You matter. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise.